again. Today I'll be doing my presentation on consumer manipulation in America, the basis of how it was formed, why it was formed, and what's next for consumerism as a whole. And so first, I'm going to talk about the formation of psychoanalysis, because this really began the formation of public affairs in corporate America. So this is a guy named Sigmund Freud, and he was the founder of psychoanalysis. It was pretty much a study to cure mental illness at the time. This was the first way of thinking that instead of diagnosing people with antibiotics and modern medicine, to actually talk about them and have like therapeutic talk sessions with them and kind of unearth hidden desires that they might have had, as say if they had like post-traumatic stress disorder, if they had hysteria, they could use these tactics to kind of unearth those emotions and kind of understand how the person was feeling at that time. And Freud kind of was at the cutting edge of this new way of diagnosing patients, and so he made this theory of human nature that at the base of all human nature, that humans are irrational, aggressive, and they have sexual forces that are hidden deep inside the mind, and forces that, if not controlled, would cause society to kind of crumble and cause chaos. And so it was his way of thinking that society needed to control these irrational desires that humans had at a natural level. And with that came the formation of the public relations, coined by Edward Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, son of Anna Freud, who was Sigmund's daughter. And so this was the era of the 1950s, where consumerism really came into fruition, where companies were kind of using these newfound realizations of human nature to kind of exploit human desire and a necessity to feel a sense of community and acceptance, and kind of this way of thinking strengthened human ego and created individualistic thoughts of perception of how reality really is. And in some ways it was extremely exploitive and corrupt, in my opinion, but at that point there was only a select few number of people who knew of these techniques to manipulate human mind, and so they really used it to their advantage. And with that, we're going to watch a quick video clip from a documentary series called The Century of the Self, that kind of talks about this dichotomy of thought between Freudian views of human nature and the oppositional views. And I heavily recommend this documentary if anyone is interested, because
Marcuse's argument was not simply that psychoanalysis had been used for corrupt purposes. It was more fundamental. Marcuse said that the very idea that you needed to control people was wrong. Human beings did have inner emotional drives, but they were not inherently violent or evil. It was society that made these drives dangerous by repressing and distorting them. Anna Freud and her followers had increased that repression by trying to make people conform to society. In so doing, they made people more dangerous, not less.
Marcuse challenged that social world, and he said that's a world that should not be adapted to. And in fact, what the individual was adapting to was corrupt and evil and corrupting. In other words, he switched the source of evil from inward conflict to the society itself. That the sickness of society lay at the society level, not at the sickness of human beings in it. And if people did not challenge that, then they were, in fact, submitting to evil.
So yeah, at the end of the 50s and early 60s, this new generation of America started to come into prosperity, and they kind of realized that their minds had been manipulated by government and by corporations, and they were very unhappy about that fact. So yeah, Edward Bernays pretty much emerged this new political idea of how to control the masses by satisfying people's inner desires, selfish desires. This one made them happy, therefore docile and easily manipulated and controlled by powers that controlled those forces. And this is causing a problem, so I'm not going to be able to make it full screen, unfortunately. But anyway, with that came again this new generation who was not really in good terms with this ideology. So Wilhelm Reich kind of was a radical figure in his day and age in psychiatry and psychoanalysis. He kind of had the exact opposite view of Freud, where he viewed that humans' inherent emotions and desires were actually good, and it was that the suppression of society was causing them to be irrational and aggressive and uncontrollable. And a lot of people kind of agreed with him, and they didn't want to be associated with materialism and with consumer products. They wanted to create their own reality and not be controlled by powers above them. And the Freudian family completely hated this ideology from Reich, and they completely destroyed his career, buried his name in the ground, and kind of destroyed his image. Unfortunately, he died right as this was all coming to, like, everyone was understanding this realization, but other psychiatrists kind of carried out his ideas and made it aware to other groups of people, like people who were protesting in college campuses and others who were against the old Freudian ideology. And next is continuation of this realization, which was the human potential movement. Was a, as it says, it arose from the countercultural movement of the 60s, and as I was saying, people were realizing that they could become whoever they wanted. They didn't need to associate with a brand or a product in order to feel comfortable with who they were. They could create their own identity from their own personal experiences and not conforming to a certain idea that the masses held at that time. And this was unfortunately kind of subdued with the conservative policy in the 1980s with the Reagan era. But as we see today, many facets of that culture has been trickling down into our society today, with meditation and yoga and jogging becoming more obviously accepted today in practice. And it was kind of unfortunate in the 1980s with the Reagan era that these ideas they kind of became a footnote in human history, where the conservative policy and kind of business deregulation at the time kind of gave this new ideology that was present in the 50s of consuming and buying. What was it? The economy at the time was really good in the 1980s, and people were consuming like no other. And this kind of subdued these new realizations found in the late 70s and early 80s. And so I think in the future, where we are today, I think we are a generation of informed individuals having all these resources of technology and the internet, and we're able to see how these devices have manipulated people. And I think we're able to see through the marketing and the consumerism, the tactics that these forces are putting on us. And I think that with the rise of our generation, these types of ideologies are going to kind of dissipate, and we're going to become sort of a human global community that realize that we cannot continue these unsustainable consumeristic tactics of needless and endless consumption, because our planet will suffer because of these ideologies, and I doubt that we want to live in a world that has such negative connotations with it. And so I guess I'll end by saying that change occurs at the personal level. Less personal consumption equals less global consumption. Now that we know about these ideologies used in the past, we're able to recognize them and see through them if they do come again. And yeah, I'm just one for sustainability. So use less, care more, and that's it. Thank you.